Ladies and gentlemen, our next event of the evening is a one-fall match with a 60-minute time limit.
Dun, 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 dun.
What I'd like to have right now,
where the big boys play.
this is where the big boys play, huh?
This is where the big boys play.
Introducing first, at a combined weight of 532 pounds, Brian, Chad, Parv. This is Starrcade 86.
Dun, 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 dun.
Next match is Ron Garvin versus Big Bubba. And Garvin comes out to the Starrcade music.
Yes.
This is a Louisville street fight rather than an Atlanta street fight. And my understanding is that this is because Big Bubba is from Louisville. Bubba's with Jim Cornette, and he comes out to, I think, the Blues Brothers music.
Mm-hmm.
He looks huge at this point, and he's announced at 357. I actually thought he may be closer to 400. He looks really big and young. Any story here?
Yeah, there's between these two, not much, but I would like to say that of anybody that really got screwed from the Magnum TA accident was Ronnie Garvin. They had been leading towards, as we'll see when we get to our main event, the main event of Starrcade actually being Ric Flair and Ronnie Garvin for the NWA title. In the weeks leading up, they mentioned the match possibly happening. It's coming pretty much. You see Garvin start to cut some interviews in September about, he'd like to put his goal back on the world title now, and he's coming for Flair. And then the Magnum thing happens. Everything gets shuffled around, and basically they quickly have Jim Cornette's guys on the November 8th, 1986 NWA Pro. They attack Ronnie Garvin, and Bubba drops a couple of big splashes on him. Next couple of weeks, Cornette and his guys are gloating in interviews, and they announce this street fight. So it was nothing of consequence, that would lead up to this. I'm not even sure why they went this route, being a street fight, maybe to make it a little more interesting or something. But Ronnie Garvin went from possibly headlining Starrcade to this.
Big Bubba is Jim Cornette's bodyguard at this time, so he's kind of wearing similar sort of gear to what he'd wear as boss man. And I'm just wondering, did he have some sort of fetish about wearing a shirt in the ring? Like, it was obviously his thing, because he's doing it here and he do it for most of his career. A little bit strange.
I don't know how you can wrestle like in the outfits he wrestles into. I know if I'm at work and I'm dressed up in a dress shirt and pants stuff, it's hard enough if I have to hurry to do something. I can't imagine being in a long physical contest like that.
Yeah, and imagine being like almost 400 pounds and doing it.
Yeah.
Unusual. We get a few jabs from Garvin to start. There's an awesome moment. Garvin kind of drops to the outside, and Cornette runs away from him, and then shouts, "Come on, Garvin, you coward!" which I thought was pretty funny. Garvin throws water in Bubba's face and then punches the crap out of him. The crowd is wild. Garvin rips on Bubba's shirt, but then Bubba has a roll of nickels and nails Garvin. Garvin has a rope, chokes Bubba with it, bites his face. Bubba gets some knees and a bear hug. But while he's in this bear hug, Garvin gets two very nasty-looking headbutts on him. Then we get a third and a fourth, and some boxing jabs from Garvin. Big right to send Bubba out. What else happens here? We get more rights from Garvin. They go back to the outside. What else? Big Bubba goes to the top rope, which I thought was mental given his size, and Garvin slams him from the top. We get a ref Young. We get a ref bump, and of course the referee is Tommy Young. So of course we get a ref bump. There's a pile driver from Garvin, but then Cornette nails Garvin, and they're down for the 10 counts. So we think we may have a draw situation here. But then Tommy Young says there can be no draw in this match. We must have a winner. The first man up wins. Cornette comes in. Young pushes him out. Garvin gets to his knees. Bossman, as he's trying to get up, grabs Tommy Young. I'm saying, look behind you, Tommy, because Garvin's basically up at this point. While Young is still trying to kind of get Bossman off him, Cornette nails him with the tennis racket. Big Bubba gets up for the win. So I thought this was pretty good stuff. I thought Garvin in particular looked pretty good in this sort of setting. But not only did he get screwed out of the main event, Brian, he actually lost this match as well.
And really, I mean, he may have lost. I'm sure he was going to lose the main event as well, but at least he would have main evented Starrcade.
Chad, your thoughts on this match?
I thought this match was really good. Some good brawling. I mean that it's called a street fight, but you know it's essentially a last man standing match. You know, for people that watch matches now, it's a last man standing match. The finish is one that we've seen a ton before, where both guys are down. The babyface would have won, but you know gets hit with something from a manager or something like that, and the heel ends up winning. I thought Bubba looked pretty green, but looked good, and I thought they did really good in really making sure that when he left his feet, when he got knocked off his feet, that was a big deal. So you had a lot of him kind of teetering like a tree in the forest, and you know, getting slammed to the outside and all that. So when he finally was down flat on the mat at the end, it made it pretty dramatic. So overall, I thought this was a good match.
Yeah, and I agree that he did look green here. I mean, he doesn't do a lot of the spots that we know from him later in his career. But like Garvin really shines in a setting like this, where he's allowed to do all of his kind of boxing moves, his punches. Like he throws some really good punches, Garvin, in this match. And the fact that Bubba's not going down makes them even better for me, because he has to like hit him 5 or 6 times before getting him off his feet. Bubba wouldn't stick around, Brian, is that right?
Big Bubba, he would be around for not much longer now, because he would head off to WWF land another. He's around through part of '87, for a little while actually, before heading off to become the Big Boss Man.
It's not till '88 when he's tagging with Akeem.
Yeah, he comes in first as a heel, by himself, the Boss Man, and then I know after Akeem from the One Man Gang turns into Akeem, they tag him up.
The thing that surprised me here is that the Big Bubba gimmick was essentially very similar to his Big Boss Man gimmick, but then when like years later when he comes back, the gimmick is totally different.
Yeah, he goes through so many gimmicks between now and the end of his career that I mean, he is Boss Man most of the time, but when he comes back to WCW at that point in '93, he is he's like the boss, the man, Big Bubba. It's a mess.
The angel.
Guardian Angel.
Yeah.
Guardian Angel, Ray Trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of a sort of an underrated guy, I guess. Like he's not a bad worker or anything, is he?
He got better with age. He really I even like a lot of the stuff he was doing in '98 when he was tagging with Ken Shamrock, and he was part of Vince McMahon's corporation. So I think he's always been pretty good in the ring.
Yeah, but at this point, a little bit less agile than we'd know him, I think. He was definitely working as a bigger man here than he would end up doing, I think.
Yeah, he's a real big guy. Bossman's actually one of the wrestlers I've been able to meet because he lived in Dallas, Georgia, which I grew up in Carrollton, Georgia, so that was about a 30-minute drive from there, and kind of through a friend that I knew actually babysitted Boss Man's kids, so I've met the Boss Man, and he was huge.
Nice guy.
Yeah, he was nice. It was nice.
Hey, Chad, is he a good payoff guy?
I don't know. I think he paid the going rate for the babysitting services, but I don't know. I've got a couple of little interesting wrestling. I mean, I guess living around the Atlanta area and how so many wrestlers were sort of camped out here. I have a couple of interesting notes about Boss Man and a few more that we'll get to when we start talking about them. But yeah, he was big. I mean, I was probably 16 at the time, which, you know, I'm 6'1" and 240 pounds, so I'm a pretty big guy myself. And at this, you know, when I was 16, I was almost 6'1" then, and probably, you know, 200 pounds. And he towered over me both in size and height.
Wow, did you get a chance to ask him any questions, or?
It was sort of like in passing. It was actually like a fall festival type thing, but he actually had some 8x10s in his car, so he went to his car and signed me an autograph. So
that's awesome.
I do have a Big Boss Man autograph framed in my house. It's
awesome.
not framed, but I do still have it somewhere in a box.
Did he sign it Ray Trailer or Boss Man or what?
He signed it Ray Trailer, but it was from his WWF, his final run. So he's in sort of his like black corporation cop suit, and it says Boss Man at the bottom, but he signed it Ray Trailer.
That's absolutely awesome. Anyway, we going into our next match. We have Dusty Rhodes versus Tully Blanchard, yet again for the TV title, and this is a first blood match. So this card is pretty gimmick crazy. Like, there's a lot of. Is there any normal matches apart from Brad Armstrong versus Jimmy Garvin? Every single match has got
the main event. The main event's the only other one that has no stipulations on it.
Tully's looking pretty pissed off coming to the ring, and he's with JJ Dillon. He's got his game face on. Dusty, we actually see him coming from the locker room. He's got really short hair. He's in a Magnum TA t-shirt. He is over like Rover, as they say, and he comes out to his own cover version of Bo Diddley's "Don't Judge a Book by Its Cover." I actually spent about 20 minutes trying to find who this cover version was by, and I have reason to believe that it's Dusty himself singing on this, which is pretty good considering. Like, he's got a decent voice.
Now let's boogie. How's this, huh? That's right, hear it. Everybody play. Yeah. You know, you can't be too quick to judge somebody. You might end up with your foot in your mouth. You can't judge an apple by looking at a tree. You can't judge a honey by looking at the bee. You can't judge a daughter by looking at the mother. You can't judge me by looking at the cover. Come on, can't you see? No, you can't judge me. I might look like a farmer, I'm a lover. You can't judge me by looking at the cover.
So, as things start off here, some plan of JJ Dillon's backfires. And I don't know what I was doing here. Maybe I was writing notes or distracted, but I didn't actually see. What was Dillon's plan?
Okay, on this version, that was cut.
Yeah, this is the only match on that New Zealand version that's clipped.
I see.
So I noticed that too, because I mean in this version it's really bizarre because you get the introductions and then all of a sudden you see JJ sort of shaking his head, and you see just his back, and then 2 seconds later, you see him where he's completely bloody, and so I had to find other means to find out what happened to JJ here.
So what did happen?
Well, he was trying to Vaseline Tully and do a couple of tactics in order for Tully not to bleed, and that got shooed off, and then eventually Dusty gave JJ the bionic elbow, and that's what's cut him open. It was one elbow shot, but I thought that was actually, I cannot believe they did not include that in this version, because I thought that was one of the more brilliant facets of this match, in that it showed that, Dusty's elbow is such a powerful weapon that, it can bust somebody open with just one shot. So
That's right.
It was a great, strategy move, that they played off of it.
Yeah, like, whoever was editing this, you'd have thought, maybe we could have lost 2 minutes of the headlock that Brad Armstrong had Garvin in that first match, and got the 2 minutes of, quite an important plot point during this match, but there we are. There's some extremely camp stuff from Dusty here, with the cocked elbow, and then the gay lean in the corner, and I don't think Dusty's ever been camper than he is at the start of this match. Like, he's really kind of doing his strutting here. Before we get any further, Brian, is there any... this is just a continuation of their long running feud, right?
It is. There were some twists and turns along the way. Without going on too long, as my voice is starting to slide again. Basically, Tully ended up costing Dusty Rhodes the world title back in August that he had won from Flair at the Bash. He helped Flair injure Dusty's leg, so when they had a rematch again in St. Louis or Kansas City, Dusty ended up passing out from the pain of the figure four and ended up losing the title. In the weeks since then, in mid-October, Dusty got his revenge by attacking Tully and injuring his leg by beating him with a chair and slapping on the figure four and not releasing it. Funny thing about that is, if you ever hunt down the video for that, I highly recommend. It's on the October 25th worldwide. It's one of the places they show it. Dusty has it on, and he's holding the second rope, and one wrestler after another comes in to try to break it, and Dusty is able to throw them out of the ring without releasing the figure four and still hold on to the ropes, like the Midnight Express and a couple others. I found it extremely impressive that he was able to do that. By impressive, I mean sad. I don't know why they would allow that to happen, but he keeps that on for a while. Should also mention that September 13th, 1986, on NWA Pro, Dusty won the World Television title from Arn Anderson. So to bring that into this First Blood feud, because this is for the television title as well. Immediately after that, Tully starts challenging Dusty for the television title, and Arn just gets shipped off to the side, I guess, and back to tag team division, which I didn't understand that either. But following that, we also have the famous October 18th bit where the Horsemen follow Dusty Rhodes to a parking lot, get him out, and beat the tar out of him. The famous Dusty Rhodes looking into the camera and saying, "Make it good." If you've ever seen that before, the Horsemen, they're following him in their car. They pull up, they beat him down with a bat and leave him laying. Finally, after that, Tully and JJ won a First Blood match, but Jim Crockett and the NWA said they do it, that they're not going to sanction it. But it's agreed upon anyway, and this match is held here, and here we go.
Yeah, I've actually seen that parking lot beatdown thing. They play it fairly regularly on what's that show? That Legends of Wrestling 24/7 show. Like they play that clip a few times. Because I think it's like one of the instances where you can see the Horseman after some skullduggery, I guess, the early Horseman.
Yeah, oh yeah.
As this match starts, we get a quite nasty looking headbutt from Dusty. To go with his streamlined new haircut, and he seems to have like Tully over one ear in writing. What's he got written over the other ear there? Did it say slut? Am I? What did it say on that other ear?
I'm pretty sure it's Tully on both sides.
Oh right, okay. I thought it said Tully on one ear and slut on the other ear.
Slut would be funny.
A reference to Baby Doll.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like,
No.
Is he getting at her? Maybe he's had his heart broken. Anyway, we get some stiff shots to the gut from Dusty and an elbow. He twists on the leg. He does 2 elbow drops on Tully's leg. JJ Dillon outside of the ring looks an absolute mess. His shirt is untucked. His hair is everywhere. He just looks dishevelled. Johnny Weaver just says absolutely nothing during this match. It's all coddle. I don't even know why Weaver was there. Like, he didn't say anything. We get a ref bump, yet another ref bump on this card. Tully tries to attack Dusty with Dillon's shoe. Dusty suplexes Tully into the ref and goes to work punching Tully's head. Blanchard is actually bleeding by this stage, but the ref is out. Dillon sneakily wipes away the blood with a towel and Vaseline. And then Tully now has the role of Nichols, which seems to be Dusty's big new idea for his big new booking idea for November 1986 is the role of Nichols, because this is the second time we've seen it. Nails Dusty with the Nichols, who now has colour. The ref is Earl Hebner, by the way, and he kind of wakes up and sees Dusty with the blood and calls for the bell straight away. Dusty's pissed and shouts no at the top of his voice. It's Starrcade 1984 all over again, and Tully is the new TV champ. I thought this wasn't long enough, and yet more ref bump finishes. Shad.
Yeah, this match was kind of perplexing for me because it mixed in some really genius psychological points with the JJ Dillon aforementioned bloody off the elbow, and then just the way JJ constantly tried to repair Tully when he started bleeding with the Vaseline. We saw more good managerial skills from him. But the finish, again, Dusty, yes, he did book himself strong, but in some ways he made himself look like a complete idiot. And this was an occasion of that, where the ref is clearly down, incapacitated. He sees Tully bloody and then starts dancing around with his arms raised in the air like a complete idiot. And then, of course, it cost him where he gets hit with the, nickels, quarters, whatever, and then is right there in front of the referee and grabs him almost like he didn't realize he was bleeding and sort of cost himself the match, which was, just completely stupid. All he'd had to done was, try to revive Hebner or something like that, and it'd have been a lot better, but I just hate when it's, blatantly obvious to everybody that he has not won the match and a babyface parades around like he has. That's one of my least favorite finishes and really distracted from this match. It was a little short too, but the finish left a real bad taste in my mouth.
Tully almost gets no offense in during this match at all.
No, not really. Did you guys also notice, I don't know if they showed it on the version you watched, Parv. Chad, I know you hunted down the match in other ways, that JJ had Tully try to wear headgear at the beginning of the match.
Yeah, that was nice too.
Yeah,
that was a good moment.
Funny.
JJ again, he's really rose up my ranks as a manager because I guess I just always had viewed him as more of a sort of passive intellectual manager that sort of sat in the corner with his hand under his chin, kind of pondering what was going on. But in this match, he was really active in the beginning, was really active when Tully first started bleeding, and really added a lot to the match.
Yeah, I always thought JJ was at his best when he was with Tully. For the whole time they're together, I think that these two are better than any other grouping of JJ with somebody else.
This is kind of the similar story to the match with Garvin as well, where Dillon is really shown to be the differentiator. Because do you remember that match where he was cleaning him up between each round? This was very similar, wasn't it? Where he was, using anything he could to his advantage, wiping away the blood. Again, Tully. Basically, if Dillon hadn't been there, Tully would have lost the match. Yeah, the match was too short for me though. It was kind of I got the impression with quite a few matches on both shows, on both the Greensboro and the Atlanta show, that they were running out of time. Like they seemed to, a lot of these matches seem to be going short for me. Probably because they spent 15 minutes on Garvin Armstrong at the start of the show. Next match we have Road Warriors versus the Midnight Express scaffold match. And this is actually why this card is called the Night of the Skywalkers, because of the scaffold. The Road Warriors are kind of standing up there already, and the Midnight Express with Cornette takes some time to get up there. Brian, any story here?
We basically we had some stuff going on into this one. Excuse me. The Midnight Express would actually end up losing their world tag titles that we saw them with at the Bash to the Rock and Roll Express. And after that time, basically we're kind of floating in limbo. You know, they want the Rock and Roll back. They'd get some rematches, but nothing big was going on. August 30th on World Championship Wrestling, the Road Warriors returned to television. And when in an interview had mentioned they were gone for a while because they had no one to fight. They were around for a couple of weeks until the September 20th, the early morning Championship Wrestling show. Jim Cornette is running his mouth about the Midnight Express taking out the Road Warriors. Paul Ellering comes out and ends up slapping Cornette during the interview. But moments later, the Midnight Express attack LOD, the Road Warriors, after a squash match. And Jim Cornette and Bobby Eaton actually beat up Road Warrior Animal pretty bad and leave him laying. And they take off. This was actually done so the Road Warriors could go to Japan for a while, but it also set up the major heat between these two teams. And after that, basically, the next couple of weeks are set up between the two, you know, talking trash, hating on each other. There's another confrontation where the LOD actually comes out and beats up some of the Midnight Express as well. And that all leads to them announcing a scaffold match would be held between the two of them. And the highlight of this feud was pretty much the weeks leading up to it, where the interviews where first the Midnight Express are training for the match on a scaffold, and Bobby and Dennis are great on the scaffold, just petrified up there, scared, or they're afraid to walk around. And then, of course, the other side of the coin was the Road Warriors. And if you can go check out, it happened on the October 25th World Championship Wrestling, is where they see the famous interview where Hawk and Animal are standing on the scaffold with the pumpkins that says Bobby and Dennis, and they basically say, "This is what we're going to do to you," and they throw them off the scaffold. And as you see them crash on the ground, it's a really cool visual as just the Road Warriors are planning on destroying the Midnight Express.
Yeah, and as this match starts, there's a lot of stalling from the Midnights. They kind of climb halfway up the ladder and then start climbing back down again. Condrey in particular is pretty great at this, like just shit scared. Cornette complains to Shivani about this match being unfair. The Warriors shake the scaffolding, and I've got to be honest, I'd be shaking it too if I was involved in this. I wouldn't want to get up there. Anyway, Midnights finally do go up, and everybody just looks so precarious up there. It's a long way down, about 25 feet they mention. Condrey has powder, and he blinds Hawk. Eaton also has powder, and he blinds Animal. The fans are just screaming. Condrey gets a nasty shot on Hawk's. He drives Hawk's face into the scaffold, which has got to hurt. Eaton, after long, it's not long before Eaton is dangling from the scaffold. Now Hawk is driving Condrey's face into the platform. I don't know if this was just my TV or what, but there's a weird whirring noise at the Omni. Sounds like there's some sort of siren or something. Really strange. Did anybody else have that on theirs?
I don't remember hearing that, no.
Condrey starts kind of climbing down. Hawk goes after him. There's a sort of pressure cooker atmosphere in this arena tonight. Condrey and Hawk are kind of standing on the structure below the scaffold, and they have a kind of a fight from there. Eaton's dangling from the scaffold again. then all 4 men are dangling from the scaffold. Convery drops all the way down from the scaffold to the ring. Eaton falls all that way as well. The Row Warriors get the win. And then in a very silly move after the match, Cornette also climbs up there, which makes no sense at all in my view. It's almost like a kind of, in horror movies where they do the exact thing that you shouldn't do. That's what Cornette does here. He climbs, I can't think of any worse place to go than on top of the scaffold, where Animal is just waiting for you. Ellering chases him up as well. Cornette also takes the drop. And that's it for this one. The Midnights and Cornette kind of like this scaffold match. They did this in Mid-South as well, right? This is one of their specialty matches.
Yeah, they've done it a bunch of places. One other thing is when Cornette took his fall from the scaffold, Big Bubba was supposed to catch him. He didn't, and Jim Cornette ended up blowing out, I know one definitely, if not two, of both of his knees. Legitimately blowing them out, so he was injured pretty bad after that.
Yeah, I was really surprised that a non-wrestler would even take that sort of bump. I mean, I was surprised that anybody would take that bump. It's a long way down.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know where you stand on scaffold matches. For me, it's pretty shitty, to be honest. I mean, you're basically just waiting for one big moment. You're waiting for the drop, and it's the anticipation of the drop. You can't really do a lot up there. Do you feel that way, Chad?
Yeah, one quick anecdote on the Cornette thing. In his shoot interview that he did, and I think the year was like 2000, he talks about that in detail, and it's really humorous to hear him because he does a great Dusty impression of Dusty describing the match to him, and he talks about how Dusty said they'd have to take a little bump off the scaffold, just a little bit, of this 25-foot scaffold. And the analogy he makes is that Bubba would be there to catch him like the cheerleaders at the football game. So that was, I always enjoy that story when you see what actually happened where Bubba was out of position and Cornette really screwed up his knee. Scaffold matches as a whole, I know there's a Coco Beware Memphis scaffold match that's held in high regard. I've actually never seen that match. All the scaffold matches that I've seen, I've pretty much hated. This was no exception. I really hated this match. I agree with you, Parv, that you are waiting essentially on one spot. This featured 10 minutes of basically people laying down on a scaffold, and and then you had the big spot. So I really hated this match.
Which Cornette shoot is that, out of interest? Because he's got about 50 million. So
yeah, this one's the RF video one. It was it's a real long one. It's 4 or 5 hours.
Oh,
and I think it was like the first real long style shoot interview he did with RF.
I think I have that, so I think I probably listened to that, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah, it's one where he's sitting in his living room wearing kind of some Zubaz pants, and then at the very end of the shoot they go to his kind of wrestling memorabilia room.
There's a really good one with Heenan where they're in that room as well, where they're just taking a look through some old programs and stuff.
Yeah. Now that one was an ROH one. I have that one also. Yep.
So yeah, I mean, Brian, are you kind of with us on this, or
yeah, I really I'm not a fan of scaffold matches. Why not put these two in a cage and let them do what they do best, and fight it out and really get this feud going? Or the other idea I had is make the scaffold a little wider, maybe. That way we can wrestle somewhat up there and throw each other around without the fear of dying. It's just, yeah, I hated as a kid, they got me with it, because as an 8-year-old, that was really, I was thinking so much about that. Oh, God, I'd love to see that. It'd be a great match to see what are they going to do up there, that stuff. So selling it beforehand was a good idea. Now, after seeing the first one, you'd figure they'd say, okay, we've learned our lesson. But they don't. They do it again next year.
I wonder if this is kind of something to pop the live crowd, though. I'd imagine seeing this in person would be a lot more exciting than sitting in your living room watching it. To see somebody fall 25 feet
Yeah, I mean, I guess
Right.
seeing it, like you said, at the physical arena might look pretty cool, actually.
Yeah. But it like the way they do the fall isn't even that kind of like dramatic either. Um, the only I'm not a big kind of spot guy. You know, the only one where I really, really, really marked out was Shane McMahon, if you can remember that. Where that was insane. He basically fell into the crash match. Was it Shane McMahon versus Steve Blackman?
Yes, when he fell off the Titantron, yeah, that was insane.
That was like, because Shane wasn't even a wrestler, and he was taking like that insane bump. That's the only one where I kind of like. I've never been big on the Hardys or anyone like that, so it's not really my scene, But yeah. So none of us are particularly high on the scaffold match. Next match is another tag match, and this is our World Tag Championship match. Interesting, really, because that last match could have easily been a work for the World Tag Championships as well, couldn't it? A lot of good tag teams at this point.
They were. I know, like, the MX and Road Warriors were just kind of the default second tag team feud, I guess, right now.
Yeah, and this is the main event in the Greensboro portion of the show. Rock and Roll Express are the World Tag Champs, and they're against Ole and Arn Anderson, who come out to the Starrcade music. This is a cage match. So it's any story going into this, or is this basically who's the best tag team for the world?
It really came down to who's the best tag team, and it's really still an extension of the whole Horseman feuding with all the baby faces, and these two had feuded some more after the Bash, but they kind of went their own ways by mid-August. Arn started mentioning on television that he was going to start to defend the television title more often. It kind of looked like the feud was over. Then, as we saw a couple weeks later, Arn ended up dropping the television title to Dusty, and Arn ended up getting back into tags. All of a sudden, a week later, after Arn drops the television title, the Rock and Roll Express in a September 20th interview on NWA Pro acknowledged that the Andersons are all of a sudden the number one contenders to the tag titles. I don't know why or how they became it, as they weren't together for a few months, but they were. Some other highlights leading up to this basically was a couple of fights between the teams as they led up here, and the Rock and Roll Express actually asked for this match to be in a cage, as they wanted to keep the rest of the Horsemen out and be able to defend their tag titles properly with no run-ins or anybody hurting them. A couple other side notes from this is there was a couple of good television matches. I know Ricky Morton took on Ole Anderson in a pretty good TV match, ended up in a brawl at the end. And Robert Gibson was actually injured for a little while leading up to this match, and during that time Jim Crockett allowed Ricky Morton to wrestle with anybody he wanted as a partner to defend the world tag titles around the house shows. And he actually had a litany of some interesting partners during that time as well. So those are some things leading in. It gets us up to the cage match, and what I think, I'll say it right now, is by far the match of the night.
Yeah, well, yeah, I would. I may well agree with that when we come to it. I have to have a little think about it. We get Gibson and Ole to start. Gibson gets the best of it, but then Arn comes in. Gibson gets the best of that too. This is what I describe as the face shine sequence. Morton comes in, and the Andersons gain control. Gibson comes back in, and Anderson's work over his leg. Morton's back in now, but the Andersons stay on top, and Ricky eats the cage a few times, gets colour, and we get a pretty long stretch sequence, face in peril sequence with Ricky Morton playing Ricky Morton here, mainly with the Andersons focusing on his arm. The Andersons are pretty vicious throughout this. We get a nice shoulder breaker from Ole at one point. There's a few desperate hope spots from Morton. Johnny Weaver, I noticed, still bringing absolutely nothing to the table on commentary. He only breaks his silence to speak in platitudes and cliches. We get the awesome Arn Anderson Spinebuster. The Andersons are just destroying Ricky Morton throughout this match. We get another Hope spot, but Morton gets cut off, and this is after about 10 minutes or so of him taking an absolute hell of a beating. But Gibson comes in anyway. Ole has Morton up for a slam, but Gibson drop kicks Morton's back, who falls on top to get the 3. And I've just written here that this is pretty much Andersons versus R&R by the numbers in a cage, but that is nonetheless something of extremely high quality. It is what it is, but that is fun. The Andersons are great at what they do. The Rock and Rolls are great at what they do. So it's gonna be a good match. Chad,
this is one of my all-time favorite matches. Actually, I really, really have always loved this match. When I first got the Starrcade 83 through 87 tape set, probably a decade ago when I first started looking at some of these older wrestling shows, this was a match that really resonated with me then, and it still does. I love the structure that you have a tag match that's in the confines of a cage. They use the cage well. I think Earl Hebner as a referee does a real good job of enforcing himself, where Gibson doesn't look like he's not trying to help out Ricky when the Andersons start double teaming, but Hebner does a good job of enforcing himself and getting him back to the corner to maintain the tag structure. Ricky Morton takes one of his best beatings. The Andersons mix in their double team moves. There's a spot right at the end where Ricky Morton is going for the hot tag, and they show an angle from the crowd where you can see them, rising in their seats because they think he's going to get the tag to Robert, and he gets cut off right at the end. The finish where Robert essentially just says, screw it, I've had enough, and comes in, leading to the drop kick with Morton pinning. I thought was very well done. So I really, really love this match a lot.
Yeah, Brian, you're high on it as well.
Yeah, completely. It's for every reason Chad said, and the fact that the Anderson did what they did best and just tore Ricky apart, but the Rock and Roll Express still found a way to come out on top and keep their titles, although inadvertently, as we would see a couple weeks later, the Andersons end up costing them the World Tag Team titles, as they would end up losing them to Manny Fernandez and Rick Rude on television a couple weeks later, mostly due to Ricky Morton's injured arm from this match.
This has got to be one of the best kind of face in peril sequences I can think of during this match. I mean, I don't know how long it goes on, maybe at least 12 to 15 minutes, I'd say.
Yeah, it's a 20-minute long match, or like 19 minutes. So it's they do everything perfect in a good time, good work. Everything was great.
Yeah, and just the different attack. I mean, they attacked Robert's leg, and sort of gave like an appetizer of them using their double team moves and whatever. And then when Ricky comes in, they start attacking the arm and running him into the cage. It just gets amplified.
Yeah. How do you think this compares to the other big tag cage match we see in the final conflict?
I like this one better. I may be in the minority, but I like this one better. I thought the time cut out of it, I thought was very good. I mean, this match just appealed to my interest in wrestling a lot more. You had a quick shine segment, which I enjoy, from the faces in the very beginning, but then immediately the Andersons start taking over on offense, and then a lot of hope spots. And I did like that this was around 20 minutes instead of the 35 plus minutes that the final conflict cage match was.
Yeah. What I was trying to say there, which is that this is by the numbers. If you were going to make a kind of textbook of how to do a tag match, the structure of this match would kind of be it, wouldn't it? with the heels double teaming, working on one of the faces who's in peril, and then a hot tag. Well, we didn't even get a hot tag here. You know, then the finish coming after that stretch sequence. You know, it's structurally it's pretty much by the book, right? But the book is the way it is for a reason.
Yeah, I would say if somebody said show me a great example of a Southern style tag match, this would be one of the first ones I would lean towards. The finish still made the Andersons look strong, and that they threw everything they had them. And if you were grading the match on points, they would certainly be by far the winner. But the Rock and Roll Express just got one high momentum move and won. So that was, I thought, a very smart finish, satisfactory finish, and did make the baby faces look strong while still having legs on the feud as a whole.
Yeah, and you wouldn't come away from that match thinking that the Andersons weren't still a world-class tag team.
Right. You didn't feel cheated by the victory, and you didn't think the Andersons kind of, were non-factors from here on out.
So that was our main event in Greensboro. We quickly then go over to Atlanta, where it's Ric Flair versus Nikita Koloff. Now, one thing confused me quite a lot here, because obviously Flair is the champ and one of the horsemen and the heel. So that makes Nikita Koloff the face, right, Brian?
Yeah, he would have been the face here. As we all know, again, Magnum was in his accident. Immediately after the accident, Dusty had to reshuffle everything. Decided to turn Nikita face, and October 24th, Dusty was going to be in a cage match with JJ Dillon and Ole Anderson, and he brought out Nikita, who immediately attacked the Horseman with him and turned face. And immediately after that, Nikita set his sights on the world title. Again, this was all stuff that had to be redone quickly, because it's my understanding that, and if you see any of the television during this time, they're heading towards Flair fighting Ronnie Garvin for the title, and Nikita and Magnum fighting one more time for the U.S. title, as Magnum, right before he gets injured, in some of his interviews, talks about getting back to the U.S. title from Nikita. Garvin starts mentioning he's going to be world champion by the end of the year, and boom, they have to throw this together literally a month before Starrcade to give us the main event, as they lost what their plans had been.
Now, the thing that really confused me coming into this is that Nikita is still wearing his CCCP top, which is obviously Soviet Union top. I'd have thought that he'd stop wearing that once he became a face.
he keeps wearing that through 87 and maybe even into 88.
That's a little bit strange. So the fans are essentially cheering a Soviet Union guy. Because why is he still wearing the CCCP top?
Yeah, they're going off the superpower thing, and the Russian and the American now together. So I also should notice that him and Dusty now were everywhere together as the superpowers.
So we get a big match feel to start off with here. A big stare down, nose to nose. There's a huge amount of stalling from Flair, and Nikita seems very strong, dominates the early going. Flair begs off, and he's quite vocal. He says, "Wait a minute, damn it, I give up," which was quite funny. We get a big bear hug from Nikita. Flair goes back to the outside, more stalling. And I'm thinking at this point, this match is taking quite a long time to get going here, because Flair is doing a huge amount of begging off and stalling. And we're a good 7-8 minutes into the match here, and we still haven't really seen a lot. The story really is that Flair can't work out a strategy to beat Nikita. Finally, around the 10-minute mark, Flair gets on top by taking out Nikita's leg on the post. He works on the leg, gets a figure 4, pulling quite a lot on the rope, and he has this figure 4 locked in for quite a long time. Nikita turns it, but Flair gets to the ropes straight away, And I just had a little thought. We've talked about the figure four not being a very good finisher and not being very well protected. But I had a little thought during this match that maybe the psychology of the figure four is that it's not a finisher, but it's not designed to make you submit. It's designed to really take its toll on the opponent. And the idea is, basically that when you get out of the figure four, your opponent is greatly weakened. So, yeah, any thoughts on that? That it's not really a finisher, but a move that's just going to take it out of the guy you're working against?
I mean, I think in the way that it's presented, that would be, in the match, as far as in a match sense, you could use that. But one reason why I don't totally buy, I don't necessarily 100% agree with that argument is, and a lot of times, maybe it was just a miscue, but the announcers would talk about how many people he'd put away with the figure four and really sort of pushed it as a finishing move.
Yeah.
And we just didn't see much evidence of that.
Okay. It was just a little thought I had when that stuff was going on. Rick Stewart and Tony Schiavone both talk about the psychology here. They said Ric Flair's got to stay on the legs, leave the upper body alone, because if he focuses on the strong upper body of Nikita, he's going to lose this, which was some neat little analysis from them. We get a nice back suplex from Flair and the little flurry of jabs that he does to the head. Standard kind of Flair spot. I kind of thought that for a match this long, Nikita maybe doesn't have enough stuff to do. JDW on the Pro Wrestling Only forums always talks about, Flair's good at just having stuff to do, to fill up time. And I did think a couple of times that Nikita doesn't have a lot of ideas here. He doesn't have a lot to go to. Anyway, Flair goes back to the outside. We get yet another ref bump from Tommy Young, and I'm starting to get a little bit frustrated at this. Nikita gets a 7 count to no avail. Scrappy McGowan now is out. But then he eats a clothesline from Nikita and lands on the outside on Tommy Young. So we get a double ref bump, and this is getting absolutely ridiculous at this stage. Then out of nowhere, Dundee, Garvin, Bubba, Rogers all come in and gang up on Nikita. Then the faces come out, various different faces, including Baron Von Raschke. We get a Pier 6 brawl, and there's just chaos in the ring. And Young straight away calls for a double DQ. And I've just written here that I'm getting really sick of the ref bump BS finishes. Like, it's okay for 1 or 2 matches on the card, but this is like getting four matches plus per show that we're doing. The brawl continues, and Flair is pissed once Nikita. The heels drag him back to the locker room while the faces kind of pile on Nikita and try to calm him down. And the show finishes abruptly with no finishes, with no interviews or goodbye speech from Schiavone and Rick Stewart. So, what do we think of this one?
I'd watched this match a couple times before and never really liked it. I really loved it at this point up to the finish. I thought that as much as I had a problem with the Hulk Great American Bash match and making Flair look weak here, it was very clear that Nikita had the power advantage. Flair did some similar bumps where he flew around for Nikita and couldn't really devise a strategy for, gaining the advantage. But as he worked the match, he was able to see some openings, and he was able to use his quick wittiness to overtake Nikita and come on offense more, whereas in the Hulk match, it was just basically Hulk had to be an idiot for Flair to gain the advantage. Here you saw Flair really strategizing to take over the advantage of Nikita. He worked him real well. Thought the kind of chop block to the leg looked good, and his punches looked really good in this match. The ref bumps were ridiculous. The bump on the sickle that McGowan took was brutal.
Yeah.
But then the ending, again, this is the fourth Starrcade we reviewed, and this is the third one that really, the ending of the main event match felt like it was building to a house show run.
Yep.
Last year, Starrcade 85 seemed to end conclusively, but of course we had the dusty finish angle that resulted from it, and so now, and this is 3 years in a row, which is really disappointing. And I know at the end, I guess they tried to do a huge schmoz brawl with a lot of the locker room to kind of ratchet up the intensity between Flair and Nikita, but I was just sort of annoyed and pissed off at that point. And the only other thing that I found interesting was it's kind of weird that in an alternate universe, Bill Dundee, Big Bubba, and Jimmy Garvin were the first three to kind of come out and start helping out Flair by tying up Nikita. So, like, I kind of saw them as like an alternate universe Four Horsemen unit, which it really would have fit them four characters together. But that was kind of interesting. But overall, the match I really liked up to the finish, but I thought the finish was really terrible, and on the biggest show of the year, which is what they claim, kind of inexcusable.
I was a lot less high on this than you were, and I think the problem for me is that I was probably comparing it to the other match that these two had, where Flair was the face and Nikita was the heel.
Yes.
And, I thought that match was really good, and probably the best Flair match we've seen. And for me, there was just too much stalling at the start of this, and it took a very long time to get going. And then once it did get going, almost like before you knew it, the match was over, because you had the massive, the massive brawl at the end, kind of brought things to an abrupt end. So, like, for me, you only really get about 10 minutes of actual match here, because the begging off and the stalling takes, like, if the match was going an hour, I could understand why you do that much stuff to take up time at the start. But, for almost 50% of the total running time to be Flair basically being on the outside and being reluctant to get in the ring is quite a long portion of the match to be taking up with that sort of thing. Brian?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said, and Chad as well. I think the only thing I'd add is they were almost stuck here. Like, what are we going to do? They had a whole show planned around something else, and it fell through. So you really didn't have time to build this feud up. So to really can give it a conclusive finish here, I don't know if it would have made much sense, actually, because you want to keep these guys going for a little while you get stuff restructured and decide the way you want to go in 1987. So I kind of saw it that way. I didn't like it ending that way, not at all. But I think with what happened in the months leading up and what they were handed, that's the best they could do.
All right, so what do we think about Starrcade 86 as a card? Because when I was watching it, I thought, oh, actually, the show is pretty solid. Everything seems all right. But having gone through it, there's a lot of shows, there's a lot of matches that don't really hit the mark.
Yeah, I think it has, one great match, a few, good, solid matches, a lot of matches in the beginning especially that I didn't like, but I think if you started the match, if you just started the show with I guess maybe the Sam Houston, Bill Dundee match and then played that through, it'd have been pretty good. I had a lot of problems with the finishes of this show, so that's probably the biggest thing I'd take away from that.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. It's nostalgia-wise, I love it just because I remember seeing this as a kid and things, but actually viewing it, as a wrestling show, there's a lot of bad in this. And yeah, for me, it's kind of like 85, beginning of 85 through the end of 86 is kind of, I think, Crockett's best 2-year run ever. And just kind of, again, what happened with Magnum and everything falling into this show at the end was kind of just like the end of the good stuff. 87 and 88 are okay for Crockett, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good stuff in there, but them being like this upper echelon can do no wrong type of promotion kind of started to end right here.
One little fun thing that we did last time we did Starrcade was look at the Greensboro card and look at the Atlanta card and say which one you prefer to be at. So shall we do this very quickly? the Atlanta show was Brad Armstrong, Jimmy Garvin, the Russians versus Mantell and Jaggers, Dundee versus
Houston.
Bubba versus hold on.
Garvin.
Yeah,
Ronnie Garvin.
Bubba versus Garvin, Row Warriors versus the Midnights and Flair Nikita. That's your Atlanta show. And then your Greensboro show is Hector Guerrero and Baron Von Raschke versus the Barbarian and Pez Watley. Wahoo versus Rick Rude. Valiant versus Paul Jones. Blanchard versus Dusty Rhodes. And the tag title cage match, Rock and Roll Express versus Arn and Ole.
I guess I would just go with the Greensboro card. And quite frankly, it's all based off the Andersons Rock and Roll Express match.
Yeah, exactly. Why you just could have said it any better? Greensboro cage match.
Yeah, I think the Atlanta card probably, as an average, is stronger. But the Greensboro card has got the big main event. The Greensboro card's got a lot of crap on it as well, though. Like,
right.
Basically everything else. I suppose the Tully Dusty thing is fun enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd probably be in that show as well because. So, is there any question about our match of the night? You're both going for the cage match.
Correct.
Yes.
Now, I may go for a different match because I was a big fan of the Bill Dundee Sam Houston match. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, I'm gonna controversially go for Dundee versus Houston. Now, I wouldn't defend that. I wouldn't say, like, if you ask me which is the better match, I'd obviously go for the tag match, for the cage match. But for some reason, I really enjoyed everything Dundee was doing in that. So I'm gonna break ranks and go with that just to be different. MVP.
For me, I would go with Ricky Morton. He has a ton of great performances, but I think this, when looking at the scope of his career, could definitely be shown as a signature performance. And I thought he was fantastic in that tag match.
Brian?
My MVP for this, I think, would be Nikita, because he basically had to change his entire way of doing things from that hated Russian to a babyface in a couple of weeks and still get all the fans that care about him quickly. And they do in the main event here. So I think the MVP will be Nikita for being able to step up so easily and get into that main event picture.
And mine would be, surprise, surprise, Bill Dundee, because I thought he was awesome in that. And this may well be the amount of exposure I've had to him, because I haven't really seen a lot of him. So, maybe I'm being impressed by stuff he usually does, but I actually just thought he was when they say, like, if you're an actor and you've only got a small part, you want to make it stand out. That's what he did to me. He was in a mid-card match here, and he stood out, which is, more than anybody else did in a lot of those pretty crappy mid-card matches on this show. And finally, we got the Billy Graham Award.
For me, I would go with Bobby Jaggers. Bobby Jaggers. He was. I know he's a guy I've heard about from Central States and Puerto Rico. Haven't seen a ton of him. And here, I thought in the tag match that he was in, I thought he looked fat, slow, pretty terrible. So he's got my vote this night.
For me, it's Jimmy Valiant, just because even in his moment of glory, he still gets his ass kicked and left laying in a pool of blood. And the final ending of Paul Jones basically raping his dignity and everything else away from him, and all he got in the end was Paul Jones' hair. So Jimmy Valiant for just finally being the nail in his coffin finally put in here.
For me, nobody brought less to this show than Weaver on commentary. Like, seriously, what was that? I've never seen a guy bring less to like, he didn't even say, he probably wasn't actively kind of offensive like Linda Curry, but in terms of what he actually brought, like, he may have said about 10 things all night. So I'm going to go with Johnny Weaver, who I think Chad picked once. Was it you? Somebody picked him once before when he was the interview guy.
Well, I picked him. He was actually wrestling, I think, in the Starrcade '84 show. So yeah, this is his second dip in the Billy Graham Award, or maybe it was. Oh no, it's the Final Conflict. That's what it was.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Because in the Starrcade match, I thought he did fine, but in the Final Conflict match, I thought he brought nothing to the table. So he got my vote there, but he certainly didn't do anything of note in this tonight either.
Yeah, no, we've seen Weaver now. Suck as a wrestler, Suck as an interviewer, and Suck as an announce guy. So, I should mention that if you do go to the where the big boys play kind of blog page thing, I have now listed all of the end of show awards we do, broken down by who picked who per show. So hopefully, you know, when we've done another 20 or so of these, that will be interesting to look back on. It's already interesting to see some of the trends. I think this is the first show in a while where Tully Blanchard wasn't even in contention for MVP. So that's broken quite a run that he was having. The other thing I just want to mention before I go here is that something absolutely awesome happened on the forums this week. I was arguing with a guy called Matt D about the fallout of the Baby Doll turn. Like, how did Baby Doll turn? Matt D was arguing that if you remember when Baby Doll turned face, JJ Dillon had convinced Tully that she was cheating on him. Was that right, Brian? That was the story?
See, that she had gone on vacation, and she disappeared for a while, wasn't around to take care of Tully's needs, and she said, "Oh, JJ, you let me go on the trip," and JJ said, "Oh, no, I didn't," and then he slapped her.
So I was watching this play out on the Horseman set that I have. And I said, you know, that's quite interesting that Tully Blanchard and JJ Dillon kind of have this lurking in their relationship, that Dillon's basically tricked him, so their relationship is based on bad faith. You know, if Tully would ever find out what Dillon had done, he'd be pretty pissed off, right?
Yeah.
Matt D was arguing that actually no, Blanchard was in on it from the start. That like he knew what Dillon was up to and was playing along with it because he wanted to be shot at Baby Doll for whatever reason. And I was saying, well, I don't think that works. I think that Blanchard actually did love Baby Doll, or at least love the idea of being of Baby Doll being his, and that he would never go away with it. He would never go along with a plan like this. So anyway, we were going back and forth, and Matt D actually went, unbeknownst to me, and wrote to JJ Dillon, who wrote back to him with a really long answer. You know, he wrote a good paragraph there to answer the question. He said, "To answer your question, Tully was not part of any plan designed to dump Baby Doll. It was more a case of me seeing an opportunity to possibly become Tully's exclusive representative.
Yep.
It was a risky move on my part. I took advantage of the fact because it was around the holidays and Baby Doll had been away for a few days." And he goes on. So basically,
that's awesome.
Everything I said was right. So this was probably the best moment of my kind of foruming life. I'm gonna have to look that up. As a guy who posts on wrestling boards, it was kind of like, I don't know if you've ever seen Annie Hall, the Woody Allen film, where the two guys are arguing in the queue about the film, and Allen just goes and gets the director, and the director comes and, you know, puts this guy in the queue right. It was kind of like that, where you know, Dillon comes out and gives the definitive answer here. Pretty amazing. So, yeah, that made my week. So, where are we going to go from here, guys? Are we going to try to do Super Towns in the Superstation?
We can take a look at it and then see what we got here, and then go from there. I'm going to take a look at it, and we'll make a decision after that.
Chad, you still around?
Yeah. I mean that I guess we can see, I know the first part of 87 has a few sort of interesting things where we might look at the Crockett Cup, and then there's that episode of Worldwide that has the Flair Wyndham 45-minute draw.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
that would be maybe interesting to look back on and see how it holds up. So there's kind of a couple of directions we can go, and I guess we'll just see which way we want to do.
Hey, Parv, I got to run. My wife's calling me something with my kids. So.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for this week, and I look forward to getting into 87 with you guys.
Amen, buddy. Great show.
Good.
See you guys.
See ya.
Fans, for all of us here at WCW at Center Stage, for Cowboy Bill Watts and the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, I'm Jim Ross saying good night, everybody.